You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 173. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, I have an incredible author joining me for a fantastic conversation and one that we need to be talking more of. I met Sarah Levy when Catherine and I went to the book launch of Alicia Fernandez Miranda and the bookstore opening of Zibby bookstores. Sarah was sitting next to Jennifer Gray with her memoir, Drinking Games, and Catherine went up to her, handed her her own book, and said, "My name is Catherine. It's with a K and two A's. Please sign it." Not knowing that this was not a children's book by any means, but Sarah was kind enough to sign the book for her and put it in her name, and Catherine knows that in about 10 years, she'll be able to read it. Drinking Games is Sarah's story of how she came to sobriety and the path that it took, how she went from college to being in a corporate world in New York City, and what she was experiencing when she learned that drinking wasn't about blacking out all the time. That wasn't normal. And how she took the steps to find not just a group to help her on her recovery journey, but what that meant down the road. How was her life going to change? I love her story because it's brutally honest. She is so candid and takes you on what her life was looking like, from taking a drink to waking up in the morning and having no recollection of what happened the night before. And I have to say, that's got to be the scariest thing to put this all out there. So I commend Sarah so highly for doing this and for talking about this, because as you'll hear us talk in our conversation, we don't talk so much about what that journey looks like. We also have a tendency, our culture, to ask someone like, "Why aren't you drinking?" versus being proud of them and not making it feel weird for people who don't drink, who are sober curious. We should be making it normal for them, and it shouldn't be called out the way it is so often. So I really loved my conversation with Sarah. I know you will too, and I hope you will pick up the book Drinking Games. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you, Michelle?
I'm so good. It's only been like a month since I got to actually see you and meet you, but now we get to really talk.
I know. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Thank you. And as we know, Catherine, my daughter, will be the most excited listener of this one.
Hi, Catherine. I'm so excited to talk to your mom and loved meeting you guys.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to play this for her before it even airs, and she's going to just, oh my gosh, fangirl so on you.
I was just telling you before we started to record that I was like Catherine, a huge book lover my whole life, and loved going to the library with my mom and going to bookstores. And I just think it's so special that you guys did that mother-daughter day and came out to a bookstore. It's the best.
It was, and yeah, it was our first like real mother-daughter day. We'd never flown alone. So, it's much easier with one kid and when they're walking and talking, because I've done it with both kids alone, and that is a very different story. But this was so just chill. And she actually cried on the plane ride home because she said she had such a good time and didn't want it to end.
That is so sweet. Well, speaking from experience, you have many mother-daughter trips in your future. My mom and I are planning one right now for a couple months from now. So
I love it.
They're the best. Yeah,
I love it. And now we're like 2 minutes in and we haven't introduced you. Can you please take a moment to tell everyone who you are?
Yes. So my name is Sarah Levy. I am a writer and the author of Drinking Games, which is my memoir in essay form.
I love it. And it's a great book. Mine is autographed to Catherine, and she'll read it in 10 plus years.
Yeah.
But it's the story and journey of basically your sobriety, right?
hmm
I mean, for lack of better words, that's what it's about. And
hmm
I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you. I was reading it with a White Claw in my hand. Um,
hmm That's okay.
and I was like, well, this is not going on Instagram. This is kind of weird that I'm reading this about drinking. And um, share about why you wrote the book. Like, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got sober when I was 28 and living in New York City, which was 5.5 years ago now. And I live in Los Angeles. I'm married. My life looks very different today than it did back then. But in my 20s, I was really struggling with my relationship with alcohol. I didn't drink alone. I didn't drink first thing in the morning. We had these ideas of what it looks like to have a real drinking problem. And that wasn't the category that I really fit into. But, I drank socially, I drank with friends. And when I did, I often blacked out and had these horrible hangovers and just felt like I was stuck in this cycle where drinking was all I knew. It was how I celebrated. It was how I coped with stress. It had just become a really big part of my identity as like a young professional living in a big city. But then on the other hand, I felt so stuck. I just felt like, I know that I can't really make plans the day after drinking because I'm going to be hungover and I'm going to be just like feeling anxious. And it was just this kind of vicious cycle. And I felt really alone. I didn't know anyone who was sober. I didn't know this was before Instagram existed, but this was before really like podcasts had taken off and there was no sober curious movement. There were no like sober influencers. And I felt really alienated. And when I got sober, I mean, it was the best decision I ever made. It really changed my life in so many positive ways. And I had always loved writing and studied creative writing in college. And I just started writing about my experiences, honestly, for fun. Like I was journaling and then I started freelancing a little bit. And over time, I sort of started to think like, I wonder if there are other young people, young women mainly, who are struggling the way that I was. And I would have loved a book like this, not just a book about drinking, but really about what it looks like to opt out of something that's no longer serving you. And that's what I was so curious about was what would it look like to be single and working and have all my same friends, but not drink? How would it impact my life? What would weddings be like? What would traveling be like? How would my confidence change? Like, I just had no idea how to do a lot of things without drinking. And so that's really what this book is. I do talk about my experiences with alcohol, but I also really shed light on what happened, in sobriety as I kind of navigated a lot of firsts.
When you talked about blackout, to be honest, when I first was reading it, I'm like, she passed out in all these times. And then it hit me. I'm like, no, she didn't pass out. She blacked out. She was still present. And there's been one moment that I can remember in my life that I truly, both of us, my husband and I, blacked out. We were in New Orleans.
Mm.
And that's just trouble as it is.
hmm
And I can remember the last bar, the last shot. There was a pretend nurse handing the shots out. And the next morning, we're like, how did we get back to our hotel?
Mm.
And it took me to reflect back on that to go, this is what she's talking about. It's
Yeah.
that you continue doing whatever you're doing, but you really have no recollection of it at all and how scary that is. And you
Yeah.
wrote about that. I mean, it's really powerful that you were so candid and honest of this is what happened. I woke up and I'm like, who are you? I got to
hmm
get home.
I thought that everyone blacked out when they drank. I didn't know that people could get drunk and still retain memories. So, for anyone listening who doesn't know what a blackout is or hasn't experienced one, it's not falling asleep and passing out. You're awake, you're able to carry on conversations. To an average onlooker, they would have no idea that you were in a blackout. But it's characterized by a loss of like short-term memories. You're no longer able to form short-term memories. So people around me, like a tip off or like an indicator that I was in a blackout would be if I started repeating the same thing over and over again. Like, where are we going next? Or, right, like asking questions where they were like, we just talked about this. I literally was not forming new memories because my brain was so flooded with alcohol. And it would be like just stretches of time where I would, yeah, like you're saying, I would have a memory of taking a drink and it didn't happen every single time I drank, but more often than not, I would be a few drinks in and it was lights out. I would have no additional memory, and I would wake up often the next morning and have to kind of like play detective and piece together, who did I talk to? I would look through my phone, text messages. I would see pictures of myself where I'm awake, I'm smiling, but I have no memory. And it was really scary, but it was also like very normalized in college and, in my 20s in New York. Like, a lot of people blacked out, and it was just this like funny thing that we did. But I learned, especially after getting sober, that not everyone blacked out all the time. And in fact, some people didn't black out at all. They would just be really drunk and then say like, okay, I'm going to switch to water, or it's time to get some food and like head home for the night. Whereas I was not present. Like I was not in my body at a certain point after a certain number of drinks.
And I found it really interesting that kind of when you started to be like, okay, I'm going to be sober, and you started opening up to people like your family or like your dad, who was like, well, can't you just have one? Like,
Yeah.
what's the problem with just one?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
even I remember when I switched to ginger beer because
Mm-hmm.
I was pregnant with 2 kids, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
long period of time where I wasn't drinking, and our friends would be like, what, really? You can't? You're not? Or one friend was on a diet and she's like, I'm just drinking like sparkling water. And they're like, really? Really? Why?
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's normal for us to question, why are you not drinking? But it's not normalized to question, why are you drinking so much?
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And, for me, like I would have loved to be able to only have one or two drinks. Like I spent years really trying to moderate my drinking, and sobriety sounded awful. Like it was my last resort. I thought it sounded boring, and like people that are sober think they're better than everyone else. And like I didn't want it at all. And I think that for some people, who start to drink early, like maybe you're a teenager or you're in college, like your brain setting changes, where for me blackouts became kind of the default setting, and it was so hard for me to moderate my drinking. It was not fun. Like I could have one drink, but the whole time I was just thinking like, am I going to have another one? How long do I have to wait? And it just really wasn't appealing. And I think you're right that we ask, we're so curious about why people don't drink. And we don't often ask like, but why do we drink so much? And why, for me, like I started drinking when I was pretty young. I really didn't know who I was. And so throughout these really formative years and these formative experiences of like falling in love for the first time and going to college and picking a major and having internships and really like forging this path, I was drinking a lot consistently. And so it's like, how does that impact, like our formative selves during these like really scary and important years?
You bring up such a good point, because I know in my 20s, I was working in the corporate world. I moved around to big cities that I didn't know anybody in. And like,
Mm-hmm.
to have a bottle of wine after the end of a day, that was no big deal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yep, one down. But at the same time, these were days when people would go out for happy hour and then go, oh, I'm going to go hit the gym. And I was like, wait, you're going to hit the gym after you just had a happy hour? Like, this makes no
Oh my gosh.
sense.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I could drink at night and then be up at 5 a.m. working out on the treadmill. Those days are long gone. But,
Mm-hmm.
your body's capable of so much more too when you're in your 20s, that I think there's a disconnect. And of course, our culture
Mm-hmm.
doesn't talk about, what is appropriate drinking. There's so
Yeah.
much that we're not taught in school. How do you balance your
Oh my
checkbook?
God.
How do you drink, like,
Oh my God. Yeah.
normally? Like, these are all things that are not taught. We don't know about it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And, my parents did a great job, right? Don't drink and drive, right? Like underage drinking was not encouraged. If you're out at a party and people are drinking, call us, like we'll come get you, right? Like there was dialogue about it in my house. And even still, I had no idea about how alcohol would impact my body, how it would impact like my ability to make decisions and like the long-term effects. I always thought like, okay, I'm in college and, I went to a really good college. I felt like I had sort of earned the right to party, and it felt like a really feminist act. I write about this in Drinking Games. Like I was keeping up with guys in the classroom and we were all like intellectually on the same plane, and then we're going out and hanging out in the frat basements or at the bars, and like I'm keeping up with them there too. And it all felt like fun and empowering and innocent. And I had no idea that when I graduated and moved to New York City, like I would spend the next few years really trying to recreate that experience. And in moments where I felt lost or like professionally adrift, it was so easy for me to just reach for a drink. And and I would look around and not everyone was doing that. Like a lot of people were, of course, going happy hour, but to your point, like some people were having one drink and then going back to the office or going to the gym. And it became like much more of an escape for me, where I just wanted to kind of check out because I really didn't know who I was. I'd just gone through a breakup. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And, I think that there was a lack of conversation about that for me, of like, these are normal feelings. This is a scary time. You're going to figure it out. And I think alcohol kind of became my friend in a lot of those situations where that was like, I could have a glass of wine, and that was the sigh of relief after a really long day that I needed.
Yeah, and our society has put on that, oh, you just have the glass of wine to relax, and like that's all it is. And then wait till you hit 40, because that glass of red wine does all kinds of sinus things to you.
Oh my God.
One glass of red wine, and I'm like, oh, forget tomorrow. Like literally one glass is bad stuff.
Yeah. And I got to a point where, I had just turned 28. It was 4 days after my birthday. And I just was so sick and tired of feeling like I was treading water. Like I had these dreams. I always wanted to write a book. I wanted to find, like, not that finding love was the solution, but I desired a partnership, and I felt like I was going on all these like dead end dates and I wasn't forging meaningful connections with anyone. And I just felt really stuck, and alcohol was just like the common denominator where, when I got drunk, I temporarily felt better. And then the next day, like I felt so awful. Who did I text? Who's mad at me? What happened? And it was just like I was heaping chaos onto what was already kind of a tenuous time. And it was a hard decision to remove alcohol from my life. Like I said, I didn't know anyone who was sober, and it almost felt dramatic, like abstaining altogether, and, I remember my dad saying, can you just have one? And I just was like, I have such a black and white personality that I need to remove it altogether. It was almost a relief to just say, you don't have to drink anymore. And I started to feel better, pretty quickly. And, I would have never expected it. If you had told me at 25, even 27, that was the path that I would take, I would have been like, oh, that sounds horrible.
And I feel like 5 years ago wasn't that long, but
yeah,
our drinks, our non-alcoholic beverages have come such a long way that even 5 years ago, it's like, well, what did you drink? Whereas now I'm drinking a LaCroix as we're talking, and that could be very, cocktail-esque, if that's even a word. I might have just made that up.
No, I love it.
But now we have more things.
There were no options, right? Like there's non-alcoholic wine. There's like,
it's not very good.
Yeah, I haven't tried them, but there are full like non-alcoholic bars and non-alcoholic spirit shops where you can buy mixers and all kinds of things. And none of that existed. What did I drink when I was newly sober? Seltzer and lime, or, like water. And I was very hydrated. And I remember like in some early social situations like weddings and happy hours, feeling so much shame that I wasn't drinking, that I would go up to the bartender and order a seltzer in like a tumbler glass to make it look like a vodka soda or something. Or I would order, like if everyone was doing tequila shots, I would have like a shot glass of water, and I would like take that with everyone. And it's just like I did what I had to do to get through some of those like early situations. But yes, I think today for people who are sober curious or just like wanting to drink less, there are so many more options, which is crazy that in 5 short years it's exploded the way it has.
Yeah. But like you said, there weren't even, I mean, podcasts were around, but they weren't that popular either. So the world is
Mm-hmm.
constantly changing and evolving, sometimes for the
Yeah.
better, sometimes not. But, for these matters, it's so much better. And I think that also once you get sober, you're drinking less, overall, there's so many other
Mm-hmm.
benefits. Like I know what it's like to sleep sober and you're like, oh my gosh, you wake up so
Mm-hmm.
much more refreshed, even though there are nights that we're so tired that my husband and I will wake up and we're like, what did we drink last night? Nothing. We drank absolutely nothing. And it's a real shame
Yeah.
because we feel like crap.
Totally. And like that was one of my favorite things about early sobriety was sleeping, feeling rested, waking up and being like, "Oh my God, I remember everything I did last night." And even if I'm still a person, I still have moments of anxiety, I still have moments of like, fear, just like emotion. I remember everything I did and I don't have a headache and I'm rested. And like that just was amazing in the very beginning.
Share how you found the group of women and the AA group that was totally like your people, because I know you share in the book
Yeah.
how you went to meetings, you're like, yeah, no. And, there's that perception that we see on TV and everybody stands up and this is
Hmm.
my name. And they all look, similar and they don't look like the 28-year-old young New York female that you were, when you were going
Hmm.
through this.
Totally. So it was interesting in writing the book. I didn't know how much to share about the recovery group that I became a part of in 12-step programs because they are anonymous. And ultimately, I was just like, I'm writing a book about my honest experiences. I can't leave this out. I could never have gotten sober on my own. And so I do share about it, especially when I get messages from people that are like, how did you get sober? Right. Because me by myself, like I wouldn't be here. I needed to find a community and there's all different forms of it. But for me, it was a 12-step group. And I had no idea. There are like all kinds of groups, women's groups, young people's groups, right? Like to your point, I had this image of a dark, dingy church basement with people who were much, much older than me and didn't think that I belonged there at all. And I didn't drink, like I said, I didn't drink in the morning. I didn't drink and drive. I didn't drink by myself. Once I started to drink, I didn't really know what was going to happen. And I had a really hard time stopping once I started. And I remember talking to a therapist who was like, maybe you should check out a group and see what it's like. And I literally like turned to Google like any good millennial and just typed in, like women's recovery group Brooklyn, where I was living at the time. And there was a group that met Tuesday nights, 8 o'clock, like 2 blocks away from my apartment. It was just like it couldn't have been more convenient. And I was like, okay, I have nothing to lose at this point. And, I think if I had gone to that meeting and no one had been there or it had been like a bunch of older people, I don't know what my path would have looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that I walked into that room and it was probably 50 plus young women who were in their 20s and 30s and they were just happy. They were laughing, they were talking to each other, and they were, the group started and like they weren't just sharing about drinking or not drinking. They were talking about life, they were talking about dealing with like stressful situations and yeah, like not drinking through them. But it wasn't just about like, oh, I really want to drink today. And I thought that was so interesting that like you could go on and have like a big full life and they had jobs and they were in relationships and they had friendships and it just seemed really light. And it totally changed the game for me. I think it's so powerful to be able to, and I think that's also why like I love books and why we love to read. There's something so powerful about hearing someone else's story and identifying with it and seeing parts of yourself in it, right? It just makes you feel less alone. And that was the experience that I had time and time again, going to these groups and hearing women's stories. It was just like, I felt, wow, maybe I can do this too, and I got connected with people, they shared their phone numbers and they just helped me. They helped me get through like, how do I go to a wedding and not drink? How do I go on a date and not drink? How do I tell my friends, right? Like each first, like I didn't have to walk through any of them alone.
Like the woman who texted you when you went to the wedding the first time, and she was like, it was like she was by your side, but she remembered to
Yeah.
text you. And I was like, that is the sweetest thing that she took it upon herself to say, I've been there. I know what it's going to be like. So I'm going to be right here with you the whole way. That's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. And just speaks to what the community that you found, is like.
Yeah. And it's out there. It's in every city. There are virtual groups. Like I think there's something so powerful about seeing someone on like day one when, you were there. And for this girl who, reached out to me at my first sober wedding, she had been to her first sober wedding. Like she knew what it was like. She remembered, she could identify with all the feelings. And I think that that's just so powerful when we can connect with someone else and be like, I was where you are and you're going to be okay. I think it's like doctors, therapists, like all of it, like it's great, but there's just something really helpful about someone who's been where you are and is on the other side of it and like really gets it.
And that's why I think podcasts are the best.
Yeah,
Because somebody
exactly.
can be listening to this. They might not have read the book. They're going to go pick up the book and they're going to realize, oh, okay, Sarah's done it. I can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
All of this, somebody's been through this, and I have now the hope and the inspiration that I can get through it too. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, to be able to relate to someone is just so powerful. I want to also get into the mindset stuff and
Yeah.
the what was it called that you went to? What would you call it?
The
Like
manifestation workshop. Yeah.
yes, yes. Let's talk about that because
Yeah.
as I was telling you before we recorded, I came from the corporate world, manifestation, mindset, all this stuff. These were not words. We talked
Yes.
synergy and,
Yes.
all of those kinds of ding dong words.
Goal setting. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so now to come into this, I don't like it's a whole new space, a whole new world for me.
Mm-hmm.
And before I got my book deal, there was someone had said to me, you're not going to get a book deal with like a big five. Just don't. And
Mm-hmm.
I had a client at the time who I told her this on text message. I'm like, yeah, this woman said that I'm not going to do it. And she's like, shut your mouth right now. You take that and you lock it away. You do not put that into the universe. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
okay. All right. And I screenshot that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I got a book deal in February with McGraw-Hill. And so I
Congratulations.
sent her the news with the screenshot. I'm like, look, you told me not to do this.
Yeah.
Basically, I manifested that this is what's going to
Yes.
happen. And
Yes.
so when I read this part of your book, I was like, oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. So share with everyone what this workshop was about and then,
Yes.
what came next.
So, as I mentioned earlier, part of getting sober for me was like all these firsts and navigating new experiences. And I was invited to this manifestation workshop in Brooklyn when I had about a year and a half sober. And I'd never done anything like it before. I thought manifestation was really like this woo woo buzzword, not real, whatever. But I was like, sure, it's a Saturday morning. I'm not hungover. I'll check it out. And it was a really transformative experience. It was a lot of really successful professional women in New York. It had been organized by this group called Her, and they put on events for entrepreneurs and women in New York City. And it was being led by a manifestation teacher. And so she walked us through a guided meditation and essentially like encouraged us to visualize our lives 5 years into the future, our dream selves. And it was no holds barred, no dream is too big, really picture like, how are you waking up? What does it feel like? And it was really interesting because I was working in marketing at the time. I was a VP of marketing. I thought like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I've made it. I'll be a CMO one day. And that was the path that I was on. And and I was living in New York City, had no plans of leaving. And in this guided meditation that I did, I visualized myself as a writer, like a novelist, and I wasn't living in New York, and my life looked really different. And it was kind of strange, but I felt really happy in the like after the exercise. And I remember thinking like, well, everyone wants that. Everyone wants to be a writer and like live by the beach. Like that's not super original. But then the second part of the workshop was like speaking your vision into existence. And so we turned to the person to our left and our right, and we introduced ourselves as our future selves, and they did the same. And it was really interesting because no one else in my group had the same vision. One girl visualized herself as a jewelry designer, like living in Mexico City. Another one saw herself going back to business school. And I was like, wow, we all have completely different dreams and ideas for what our ideal lives could look like. And as I heard them describe theirs, I remember thinking, you should totally do that. That sounds completely possible. Like, why not? No one was like, I'm a princess, right? Like we were all just talking about, dreams that we had and things that we really wanted to do. It was a really interesting exercise in what I now think of as goal setting. I really identified something that I really wanted and hadn't let myself articulate before, which was, I want to write a book. I've always wanted to write a book, and I didn't believe that it was possible. I didn't let myself believe that I could do it. I didn't like jump into action right away. I just sort of, I think the seed had been planted, but over the next few months and years, I started taking action kind of that aligned with what I had envisioned for myself. So I didn't like leave my job the next day. I didn't say like, okay, I'm going to just become a full-time writer right away. But I started writing a little bit more. I was journaling more. I started freelancing a little bit. And I think I just believed that I was deserving of it. And it's like our thoughts are really powerful, right? And if we walk around telling ourselves like, you're not deserving, you're not going to get a book deal, yeah, it's not going to happen, right? But if you tell yourself like, I'm deserving, there's an abundance of opportunity for me. It doesn't happen magically overnight. I have to work. I have to write the book proposal and take the next right actions. But I think I just like something shifted for me after that workshop where I just believed that maybe it was possible. And since then, it's just become a tool that I've really added to my kit. It's not like the only thing I do. I continue to make lists and set goals, and I'm very organized. But at points where I feel like I don't totally know what is next for me, it is really helpful to just sort of think like, what would I want if I could have anything? And what would that look like?
And then your husband went and did it with you before he was your husband. Like, hello, you manifested him.
I manifested him. Yeah, I manifested like a loving partnership, and I met my husband. I was introduced to my husband a week later, which was just really weird and crazy. And a year later, I took him to the same workshop because I was like, this really worked for me. Like, I think I created you, so we should go back. And he was like, okay. And we went and we did it together, and it was really powerful. And like our visions were kind of aligned. We pictured similar things. And less than a year later, we moved to LA, and we're married now. And I wrote a book, and I'm working on a second book. And it was like a complete game changer for me.
I love it. It makes me so happy. When I got to that part of the book, I was like, it's just big smiles. I knew obviously that you made it through because we met and you wrote the book. So, but to get this, there was a different connection at the end where I was like, yes, I love it. You made it. You freaking made it.
Yeah. And it's possible for everyone. Like it really is. And I just think that we get in our own way, with like our limiting beliefs and imposter syndrome, and like all of that stuff is real, and there's a place to process those feelings, but we're all deserving, and I love that you got a book deal at a big 5 publishing company, like, because why not? There's books published every single week, every single month. Like, I think we just tell ourselves that like, oh, it's just possible for everyone else, but not for me. But you're so deserving. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you. You're so sweet. You can come to my book signing and I'll sign it for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'll be there.
It'll be full circle.
Yeah. With Catherine.
Can you share with everyone where they can find your book and learn more from you, please?
Yeah. So my book is called Drinking Games. It's available wherever books are sold. You can get it at your local independent bookstore. You can find it online. And you can get more information on my website, sarahllevy.com, or find me on Instagram, Sarah L. Levy.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was so much fun to get to talk more to you.
Thank you. It was so nice to chat.
All right, friends, did you fall in love with Sarah the way I have and the way Catherine has? Because Catherine is like literally her biggest fan. I did play for her the part where Sarah says hello to her and she couldn't have smiled bigger, seriously. So I want you to take our conversation, and I would love for you to read Drinking Games and really consider, what is it that our culture is allowing to happen? How do you approach it if someone says that they're not drinking for whatever reason it is? Whether they are pregnant, whether they are curious about being sober, whether they have started that sober path because they've recognized that drinking is not something that they can handle. It's not for them. How are we approaching these people? Why aren't we making it more normal to not drink instead of drinking as the norm? Think about all of these. And if you're sober curious, if you are thinking that you shouldn't be drinking either, then do that. Do what's best for you and know that you have support and there are resources and that it's something to be commended and we're proud of you. And if you're looking for a resource, go to aa.org as somewhere to start. Reach out to Sarah. We've also had Jillian from Sober Powered on the show. Reach out to her. People will help you and want to communicate with you. I'm more than happy to talk to you, to help you with resources and find out who you can talk to start on this journey to becoming sober. Because the most important thing is you. It's your health, it's your wellness, and it's to ensure that you're living a happy, fulfilled life, one that is healthy, both mentally, physically, emotionally, and for you to do whatever it takes to get to that point. Whether you're sober curious, on a sober journey, or not, Drinking Games is an amazing memoir by Sarah Levy, and I encourage you to pick up a copy. She's the sweetest thing ever. I adore her, and I'm so lucky to now call her friend.